Elder Mira Voss stood at the edge of the central plaza, where Maria Lopez had last been seen. In her hands she held a small Terran flag, given to her by Lena Ortiz. It was faded from smoke and sun, but its colors were clear. She folded it carefully and placed it inside a glass case made from salvaged temple glass. Around her, Kalari children planted seeds in the ash. Not flowers, not yet, but hardy grasses that could grow in broken soil. Life returning, aboard the Resolute, the crew felt the weight of what they had done. Derek Moore stood on the bridge watching Viridia turn slowly below. He missed Maria. Not with loud grief, but with a quiet ache that would stay with him always. Yet he also felt something new, pride. Not for victory, but for belonging. They had gone to a distant world as strangers and returned as part of something larger. Lena Ortiz spent her days with the Kalari scholars, helping them recover lost texts from buried archives. She taught them Earth songs. They taught her star maps drawn in sand. Noah Patel trained local healers in field medicine, leaving behind kits and instructions. Ben Carter worked with Kalari fighters to set up early warning sensors along the borders. Peaceful tools, not weapons. Maria's name was spoken often, not as a loss, but as a bridge. Back on Earth, the change was deeper than anyone expected. The United Terran Assembly met again, not in fear, but in hope. Paul Jenkins stood once more before the delegates. "We went to Viridia thinking we were giving help," he said. "But we received something greater. We learned who we are. From that day, Earth stopped measuring its strength by ships or weapons. It measured it by how many it could protect. The Assembly passed the Viridian Compact, a simple law that said any species facing unjust harm would not be ignored by humanity. Not with armies, but with aid. With presence. With the words, 'We stand behind you.' Other worlds noticed. The Velnari conquered, once cold and distant, sent scientists to help rebuild Viridia's libraries. The Thalassian hegemony opened trade routes to deliver food and medicine. Even former Zorath allies, ashamed of what they had allowed, offered reparations. A new alliance formed, not built on power, but on promise. They called it the Alliance of the Forsaken, and its first symbol was a human hand clasped in a Kalari one. Months passed. Viridia's skies cleared. Gardens returned. Children played in rebuilt courtyards. The shield was no longer needed, but they kept the central node lit as a memorial. At its base, a stone tablet bore names, not just Kalari, but human, Maria Lopez, and all who stood with them. On Earth, a quiet ceremony was held in a park in Oregon. Paul Jenkins planted a tree, a Viridian sapling grown from a seed sent by Mira Voss. Beside it, a plaque read, "For those who choose kindness when silence is easier." Admiral Briggs visited the Resolute one last time before it returned to patrol. She walked its halls, nodded to the crew, and placed a small photo on the memorial wall. Maria, smiling in a dusty workshop on Mars, years ago. "You showed us the way," Briggs whispered. Derek Moore stayed in command, but his mission changed. The Resolute no longer flew alone. It led small fleets of aid ships, carrying engineers to broken worlds, doctors to plague zones, teachers to orphaned colonies. Humanity had found its role not as conquerors, but as keepers of hope. One evening, as the Resolute drifted near a newly peaceful system, Lena received a message. It was from Mira Voss. The elder's voice was calm, strong. "The first Kalari child born after the siege has been named Marielle," she said. "In honor of the one who held the light." Lena showed the message to Derek. He didn't speak. He just looked out at the stars and smiled. Years later, when students across the galaxy studied this time, they did not call it a war. They called it the turning, the moment when the galaxy remembered that strength is not in how hard you can hit, but in how far you are willing to reach for someone falling. On Viridia, festivals returned. Music filled the air again. And every year, on the day the Resolute first arrived, the people gathered in the central plaza. They did not light torches for battle. They lit candles for courage. And in the center, a small Earth flag fluttered in the breeze, worn but never torn. Humanity had not saved the galaxy with weapons. They had saved it with a choice. The choice to see suffering and not look away. The choice to say simply and clearly, "You are not alone." And in that choice, both humans and Kalari, and many others, found a future worth building together. Yue had stood inside the ship. No one cheered. They were tired, hearts heavy with what they'd seen. But they also felt something new, purpose. Lena sat with Derek on the bridge. "They're still alive down there," she said. "And we'll keep them that way," he replied. Back on Earth, news of the rescue spread. People watched footage of humans and Kailari working together. They saw Noah treating wounds, Maria fixing machines, Lena speaking their language. It wasn't war. It was care. And it moved something deep in the human spirit. In the Velnari Concord, a young diplomat named Joran watched the broadcast. He turned to his council and said, "If humans so new to the stars can do this, what excuse do we have?" On a Thalassian trade station, dock workers refused to load weapons bound for the Zorath. "We won't help bullies," one said. Even the Zorath began to hear whispers in their own ranks. Soldiers asked, "Why do these humans risk so much for strangers?" The Resolute drifted in orbit, watching over Viridia like a quiet guardian. Below, the Kalari slept under hidden lights, safe for now. Above, humans kept watch, not as conquerors, but as friends. And in that moment, the galaxy began to change. Not with a bang, but with a choice. The choice to stand when others walked away. The choice to care when it cost something. The choice that said simply, "You are not alone." Part 4. News of the Resolute's stand at Viridia traveled faster than any warship. It moved through comms relays, trade lanes, and quiet conversations in spaceports across the galaxy. On neutral worlds, people who had never heard of Earth now spoke its name with respect. Dock workers on Ceres Minor refused to load Zorath cargo ships, saying, "We won't help those who crush the helpless." Students on the academic moon of Lyra held vigils, lighting candles shaped like Earth's continents. Even in the Velnari Concord, long proud of their cold logic, young citizens gathered outside government halls holding signs that read, "What would humans do?" The Zorath Dominion noticed. At first they laughed. Humans were newcomers, soft, untested. But as more systems questioned their actions, as supply lines slowed and morale dipped among their own ranks, the laughter faded. Their leaders sent harsh orders: crush Viridia completely. Make an example. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Dominion. Back on Earth, Admiral Helen Briggs watched the reports with quiet intensity. She knew the Resolute couldn't hold out forever. One ship, no matter how brave, couldn't stop a full invasion. She called an emergency session with the United Terran Assembly. This time there was no debate. Everyone agreed more help was needed. 2 more ships were readied, the TFS Horizon and the TFS Vanguard. They carried not soldiers, but engineers, doctors, and modular shield generators built in Earth's orbital yards. Dr. Lena Ortiz, still aboard the Resolute, sent detailed notes on Kalari physiology and Viridia's terrain. Maria Lopez's schematics of the underground energy grid were studied by every technician on the new cruise. Captain Derek Moore, tired but resolute, welcomed the reinforcements when they arrived. The 3 human ships formed a loose triangle in orbit, small but unyielding. From the bridge of the Horizon, Captain Elena Ruiz, a former deep-sea rescue pilot from Chile, sent a simple message to Moore. "We've got your back." Below, the Kailari worked with renewed energy. Elder Miravas and her people had spent days clearing rubble, tending the wounded and guarding the hidden tunnels. Now, with human engineers on the ground, they turned their attention to something greater. The old planetary defense grid. It wasn't a weapon. It was a shield, a network of energy nodes built centuries ago to protect Viridia from solar storms. If reactivated, it could hide the capital city from Zorath sensors and deflect orbital fire. Lena and Mira pored over ancient data crystals in the temple library. The instructions were written in an old dialect nearly lost, but Lena, with her careful ear, and Mira, with her ancestral memory, pieced it together. "The main node is under the central spire," Mira said, "but it needs a manual trigger. Someone must stay inside to activate it." Maria listened from the doorway, her hands stained with oil. "I'll do it," she said without hesitation. Derek shook his head. "Too dangerous. The Zorath will target that spire first." "I know," Maria replied, "but I'm the only one who can reroute the power fast enough if something fails." "It has to be me," no one argued. They all knew she was right. The plan came together in quiet urgency. The 2 new ships would draw Zorath patrols away with decoy signals and sensor ghosts. The Resolute would stay near the spire, ready to pull Maria out if possible. On the ground, Kalari fighters, few in number but fierce in heart, would create diversions in the outer districts. and Maria would enter the spire alone, with only a comms earpiece and a toolkit. The night before the operation, Maria sat with Noah in the medical bay. He handed her a nutrient bar and a small charm, a woven thread from his grandmother in Mumbai. "For luck," he said. She smiled. "I don't believe in luck, but I'll take it anyway." Derek found her later on the observation deck. Earth was a distant blue dot on the view screen. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "Yes, I do," she answered. "If we leave them now, what was any of this for?" He nodded. He understood. At dawn, the operation began. The Horizon and Vanguard launched drones that mimicked fleet signatures, luring half the Zorath ships toward the southern pole. Kalari resistance fighters set off controlled explosions in abandoned factories, drawing ground patrols away from the city center. Maria, dressed in a light environmental suit, slipped through the ruins toward the spire. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. The central chamber glowed with faint blue lines, residual energy waiting to be awakened. She climbed the spiral stairs, tool belt clinking, heart pounding but steady. At the top, she found the control hub, cracked but intact. "More, I'm in position," she said into her comms. "Copy that." His voice came back. "Zorath just spotted the decoys. They're confused, but not for long. You've got maybe 20 minutes," Maria got to work. She bypassed fried circuits, replaced shattered crystals with spares from her pack, and synced the node to the underground grid Mira's people had repaired. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her fingers moved fast, guided by years of fixing what others called broken. Then alarms blared overhead. "Maria, Zorath dropships inbound. They know where you are." "I'm almost there," she said, voice tight. She flipped the final switch. Lights surged through the chamber. The grid hummed to life, but a warning flashed on the console: power instability. The system needed a manual override to stabilize, and it had to be held for 90 seconds. She looked at the timer. 90 seconds was forever in a war zone. "More," she said calmly. "The shield's up, but it's shaky. I have to stay and hold the override." "Maria, no, it's okay," she interrupted. "Tell my grandma I fixed something important." Below, the shield flared to life just as Zorath bombers opened fire. Energy beams struck the invisible barrier and scattered like rain on glass. The capital city was safe. Inside the spire, Maria held the override lever with both hands. The building shook. Dust fell, heat rose. She closed her eyes and thought of her grandmother's garden, of clean water flowing through desert pipes, of a planet she'd never seen but had chosen to save. On the Resolute, Derek watched the spire collapse in a cloud of fire and stone. His hands gripped the console. He didn't speak. He just stood there honoring her silence, but her work held. The shield stayed strong. The Zorath bombardment failed. In orbit, the Dominion commanders grew furious. Their weapons did nothing. Their enemies were hidden. And now reports came in. Velnari patrol ships were moving toward Viridia's sector. Thalassian freighters had stopped carrying Zorath supplies. Even minor systems were forming defense pacts. The tide was turning, not by force but by courage. Back on Earth, people gathered in streets and squares. They didn't celebrate. They remembered. Schools held moments of silence for Maria Lopez. Factories paused their lines. In Geneva, Paul Jenkins stood before the assembly and said, "She didn't die for war. She died for kindness. And that is the strongest thing in the universe." On Viridia, Mira Voss stood at the edge of the ruins looking up at the sky. The shield shimmered above her like a second atmosphere. She placed a small stone on the ground, a Kailari tradition for those who give everything. And far above, the Resolute, Horizon, and Vanguard held their positions, not as invaders, but as guardians. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time in a long time, it was watching something good. Part 5. The Zorath Dominion did not leave Viridia in a blaze of glory. They left in silence, after days of failed attacks, after their weapons bounced off a shield held by one human sacrifice, after whispers of rebellion spread through their own ranks. Their commanders gave the order to withdraw. Their ships lifted from orbit like shadows retreating from light. No final threat, no grand speech. Just emptiness where cruelty had been. On the surface, the Kailari did not cheer. They wept, they held each other. They walked through the ruins not with fear but with purpose. The shield still hummed above them, a soft blue dome woven from ancient design and human courage. It would stay active for weeks, giving them time to heal, to rebuild, to breathe. They had what they needed. He checked the comms himself, testing the link to Earth one last time. Admiral Briggs's voice came through clear. "You're not alone out there. Remember that." The day before launch, Lena Ortiz boarded the Resolute. She wasn't military, but Briggs insisted she go. "You understand them," the Admiral had said. "They'll need to know we see them as people, not just a mission." Lena brought data crystals filled with Kalari poetry, music, and medical records. She hoped it would help build trust. On the ship, she met Maria, who showed her how to seal a hull breach. She practiced with Ben on how to stay calm during alerts. She even shared tea with Noah, who told her about treating a child with star sickness on a supply run to Titan. None of them knew what waited at Viridia, but they knew why they were going. As the Resolute lifted from the lunar dock, Earth watched, not with cheers but with quiet pride. Families gathered in parks, schools paused lessons, factories fell silent for a moment. They weren't sending soldiers to conquer. They were sending neighbors to stand beside someone in need. In orbit, the ship turned toward the stars. The warp drive hummed to life. Space stretched and folded. In minutes, the blue marble of Earth was gone, replaced by the endless dark. Inside the ship, life settled into rhythm. Maria monitored engine temps. Ben ran sensor sweeps. Noah checked medkit seals. Lena listened to old Kylari broadcasts, trying to catch phrases that might comfort survivors. Derek stood on the bridge, hands behind his back, eyes on the star map. Days passed. Then weeks. The crew ate, slept, trained. They told stories from home. Maria talked about her grandmother's garden. Ben remembered fishing with his dad on Lake Michigan. Noah described the smell of rain in Mumbai. These small things kept them human even as they flew toward danger. Then one morning, the long-range sensors beeped. Viridia was near. Derek called everyone to the bridge. On the main screen, the planet appeared, beautiful and broken. Clouds swirled over green continents, but smoke rose from the northern hemisphere. Orbital debris glittered like broken glass. And circling above it all were Zorath patrol ships, sleek and black like sharks in deep water. Maria's hands tightened on the console. "They're watching us." Ben checked weapon status, set to standby. "We're not here to fight," he said, more to himself than anyone. Lena stared at the planet. "They're still alive down there," she whispered. "I can feel it." Derek took a breath. He opened the comms channel. His voice was calm, clear, and carried across the void. "Terran vessel Resolute. We come in peace. We stand with the Kalari." For a long moment there was only silence. Then a Zorath ship turned toward them. Its comms crackled to life, harsh and cold. "Terran vessel. You are in Dominion space. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Derek didn't flinch. "We recognize no claim over Viridia. We are here to deliver humanitarian aid. We will not fire unless fired upon." The Zorath ship hovered, engines glowing red. Seconds stretched. Then it moved, not to attack but to signal others. More ships began to gather. On the bridge, no one spoke. Maria held her breath. Ben's fingers hovered over the shield controls. Lena closed her eyes and prayed in a language she barely knew, but Derek stood firm. He knew they were outgunned. He knew the odds. But he also knew something the Zorath didn't. Humanity had already lost too much by staying silent. This time they would speak. And so the Resolute held its position. A single ship against a fleet, its lights steady, its message clear. Not with weapons, but with presence. Not with threats, but with courage. Far below, in a ruined temple buried under ash, Elder Mira Voss heard the transmission. She looked up at the cracked ceiling, tears in her eyes. For the first time in months, she did not feel alone. Someone had come. Someone had chosen to stand. And that, for now, was enough. Part 3. The Resolute hung in orbit above Viridia, small and bright against the dark. Zorath ships circled like wolves, but none fired. They seemed confused. No one had ever defied them without weapons. Captain Derek Moore kept his voice steady over the comms, repeating their peaceful intent. Below, the planet smoldered, but life still flickered in its ruins. On the surface, Elder Mira Voss listened to the human message through a cracked speaker in her shelter. Her people huddled around her. Children with wide eyes, elders with tired hands, healers with empty kits. For weeks they had heard only silence from the stars. Now, a voice from Earth said, "We stand with you." Mira did not know if help would come in time. But the words gave her strength. She turned to her youngest apprentice, Kyle, and said, "Prepare the eastern tunnel. Someone is coming." Aboard the Resolute, plans moved fast. Derek knew they could not wait. Every hour more Kalari might die. He called his crew to the briefing room. "We go in quiet," he said. "Shuttles 1 and 2 will land near the Capitol ruins. Maria, you're with me. You know how to keep things running in bad conditions. Noah, you lead medical. Ben, you watch our backs from orbit. Lena, you're our voice down there." Lena nodded. She had studied Kalari customs all the way here. She knew they valued calm over force, words over weapons. She packed a small satchel with water purifiers, protein bars, and a data pad loaded with healing chants from Earth's own history, songs of comfort from many cultures. The shuttles dropped through Viridia's thin clouds like falling leaves. Smoke stung their viewports. Below, the capital city was half gone. Buildings collapsed, gardens burned, fountains dry. But in the shadows of broken walls, movement stirred. Kalari faces peered out, cautious but hopeful. Derek landed near a stone plaza once used for festivals. He stepped out first, hands open, no weapon in sight. Maria followed, her tool belt clinking softly. Then Noah with his medkit, and Lena holding a small white flag made from ship fabric. From a collapsed archway, Mira Voss emerged. She was tall, her silver hair braided with beads of glass and bone. Her eyes were old but sharp. She stopped 10 paces away and raised her right hand, palm out, a Kalari sign of peace. Lena stepped forward and mirrored the gesture. "We come to help," she said in slow, clear Kalari. Her accent was rough, but the words were true. Mira's breath caught. She had not heard her language spoken kindly in months. "You are human," she said. "Yes," Lena replied. "And we are not alone," that was all it took. The Kalari came out, not in a flood, but slowly, like plants reaching for light after a storm. Children clung to their parents. Elders leaned on canes. A young healer named Torin ran to Noah, showing him a wounded elder with a fever. Noah knelt without hesitation, scanning the injury, offering clean water and medicine. Maria followed Mira to a hidden chamber beneath the temple ruins. There, ancient machines hummed faintly, part of Viridia's old energy grid, damaged but not dead. "If we can restore power," Mira said, "we can shield the shelters from Zorath scans." Maria ran her hands over the dusty panels. Wires were frayed, crystals cracked, but she saw a way. "I can reroute the main conduit," she said, "but I'll need parts and time." Back on the Resolute, Ben watched the Zorath ships grow restless. Their comms buzzed with angry orders. He knew they wouldn't wait forever. He patched into the shuttle channels. "Derek, we've got movement. 2 Zorath scouts breaking orbit. They're heading your way." Derek's voice was calm. "Copy that. Keep the Resolute ready to lift if needed." On the ground, the humans worked fast. Noah set up a triage station in a half-standing library. He treated burns, infections, broken bones. He showed Kalari healers how to use Earth's antiseptics. They showed him which local plants could ease pain. Together they saved lives. Lena walked among the people, listening more than speaking. She learned names. She held hands. She sat with a mother whose child had vanished in the bombings. She didn't offer empty promises, just presence. And that meant more than words. Maria, deep in the chamber, soldered wires with steady hands. Sweat dripped from her brow. Mira brought her water and soft bread. "You work like one of us," the elder said. Maria smiled. "My grandma used to say, broken things just need someone who cares enough to fix them." Above, the Zorath shuttles descended. They hovered over the city, scanning, searching. Ben sent a warning. "They're looking for you. Get ready to move." Derek gathered his team. "We can't stay, but we'll come back." Mira's eyes filled with fear. "They'll burn this place when you leave." Derek looked at Maria. "Can the grid buy us time?" Maria wiped grease from her face. "If I finish the bypass, it'll mask heat and life signs for a few hours. Maybe more." "Do it," Derek said. While Maria worked, Lena helped Kalari families move deeper underground. Noah packed extra supplies for them to use later. Ben, from orbit, launched a series of decoy drones, small, cheap, but loud on sensors. They flew east, drawing the Zorath scouts away. The trick worked. The enemy ships chased the drones into the mountains. For now, the city was safe. Maria finished the bypass just as the last family disappeared below. She flipped the final switch. A low hum filled the chamber. Lights flickered on in the tunnels. Soft, blue, safe. Mira placed a hand on Maria's shoulder. You gave us more than time. You gave us hope, Derek called for evac. The shuttles lifted as the Zorath turned back, confused by the empty city. From orbit, Ben guided them home. The Resolute's bay doors closed just as the first Zorath beam struck the plaza where the... Part 1. On the far edge of the galaxy, where starlight grew thin and silence stretched for light years, the planet Viridia burned. Smoke rose from its cities, curling into a sky once known for its twin sunsets and gentle winds. The Kailari people, who had lived in peace for over 300 years, now huddled in underground shelters, their libraries turned to rubble, their gardens trampled by armored boots. They had never raised a weapon in anger. Their strength had always been in words, in knowledge, in offering safe harbor to travelers from every corner of space. But when the Zorath Dominion came demanding surrender, no one answered their calls for help. The great powers of the galaxy, the Vilnari conquered with their gleaming fleets, the Thalassian hegemony with their ancient laws had all turned away. Non-interference, they said, not our concern. Even species who once traded with the Kailari, who had studied in their universities or healed in their clinics, now kept their comms silent. The Kailari were alone. Their last message, sent through a failing relay satellite, crackled with static and sorrow. We are alone. No one answers. That signal, weak and fading, drifted across the void until it reached the edge of human space. There, on the far side of the moon, inside a dome-shaped station built into the lunar rock, Lieutenant Chris Dawson sat at his console, sipping cold coffee and watching the data streams scroll by. He wasn't expecting anything unusual. Earth's deep space network mostly picked up cosmic noise or old alien broadcasts repeating like ghosts. But this was different. The pattern was structured, urgent. He flagged it immediately. Within minutes, Dr. Lena Ortiz was at his side. She wore a faded blue jacket and had tired eyes, but her mind was sharp. She'd spent the last decade studying alien languages, especially the soft, melodic tongues of the Outer Rim. As the recording played again, her fingers tightened around the edge of the console. It's Kailari, she whispered. They're begging for help, Chris frowned. I thought the Kailari were neutral. Why would anyone attack them? Because they refused to join the Zorath Dominion, Lena said, and because no one would defend them. She pulled up star charts, news logs, diplomatic bulletins. Every major power had issued statements of regret, but none had sent ships. None had even replied to the Kailari's final plea. The galaxy had abandoned them. Lena didn't hesitate. She grabbed a datapad and walked straight to the command wing of the station. There, in a small office overlooking the silent lunar surface, sat Admiral Helen Briggs. She was in her late 50s, with short gray hair and hands that still bore the scars of Earth's last civil conflict. She'd helped unite the fractured nations of the planet under one flag. Not through force, but through stubborn fairness. She looked up as Lena entered, her expression calm but alert. Admiral, Lena said, placing the recording on her desk. We just received this from Viridia. The Kailari are under attack. They're being wiped out. Briggs listened to the message twice. The second time she closed her eyes. When she opened them, her voice was low but firm. And the conquered? The hegemony? Silent, Lena replied. Everyone's pretending it isn't happening. Briggs stood and walked to the window. Earth hung in the blackness below, blue and fragile. Humanity had spent centuries tearing itself apart. Over land, over belief, over fear. Only in the last 50 years had they begun to heal, to reach for the stars not as rivals but as one people. Now, faced with a choice, Briggs knew what it meant to be human wasn't just about surviving. It was about standing up when others wouldn't. Get me Captain Derek Moore, she said, and alert the Resolute. We're not staying silent. Back on Earth, the news moved slowly at first. Most citizens had never heard of the Kailari. But when the United Terran Assembly convened in Geneva, the mood shifted. Representative Paul Jenkins, a quiet man from Oregon who'd taught history before joining politics, stood at the podium and spoke without notes. He told the story of a people who offered kindness and received betrayal. He reminded them of Earth's own dark past, of cities bombed, of neighbors turned away at borders, of silence that cost lives. We spent generations learning that lesson, he said, his voice steady. Now the galaxy is repeating it, but we don't have to. His words spread, not through grand speeches, but through messages. Through schoolrooms, through dockyards where engineers like Maria Lopez paused their work to listen. On Mars Colony 3, a group of students held a vigil. In the shipyards of Luna, workers volunteered overtime to prepare vessels for deep space runs. Something was stirring, not anger but resolve. Meanwhile, aboard the TFS Resolute, Captain Derek Moore reviewed the mission parameters. His ship was new, one of the first true interstellar cruisers built by United Earth. It carried no planet-killer weapons, no cloaking devices, but it had medical bays, shield emitters, and a crew who believed in more than just orders. His tactical officer, Ben Carter, ran simulations against Zorath patrol patterns. His medic, Noah Patel, packed extra trauma kits. Engineer Maria Lopez checked every thruster, every oxygen recycler, knowing lives would depend on them. Moore didn't know if they could win, but he knew they had to go. On the day of departure, Admiral Briggs stood on the observation deck as the Resolute lifted from the lunar dock. She didn't salute. She just watched it vanish into the stars, a tiny spark against the dark. Far away, on a dying world, Elder Mira Voss clutched a data crystal containing the last of her people's history. She had stopped hoping. But in the silence of her shelter, she heard a new signal. Not from the conquered, not from the hegemony, but from a species so young, they'd only just learned to fly among the stars. The message was simple, clear, and carried no hidden agenda. Terran vessel Resolute. We come in peace. We stand with the Kalari. For the first time in weeks, Mira Voss allowed herself to cry. Not from fear, but from something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Part 2. Back on Earth, the decision to help the Kalari did not come easily. The United Terran Assembly met in a large hall in Geneva, under a dome that showed the sky even when clouds gathered. Delegates from every region sat in curved rows, their faces lit by soft screens. Many were worried. Earth had only just stopped fighting itself. Cities were still being rebuilt. Food and energy were shared carefully. Sending a ship to a distant war seemed reckless to some. We barely have enough to protect our own colonies, said one delegate from the Pacific Union. Why risk lives for strangers? Others nodded. They spoke of the Zorath Dominion, how it crushed whole systems, how its warships outnumbered Earth's fleet 10-1. They said getting involved would bring destruction to human worlds. Fear hung in the air like fog, but then Paul Jenkins stood up. He wore a simple gray suit and held no notes. He looked out at the room, not with anger, but with quiet sadness. 100 years ago, he began, my grandparents lived through a time when nations watched as others suffered. They called it not our problem. Millions died while the world stayed silent. We swore we'd never do that again, he paused. Now the galaxy is doing the same thing. The Kalari never hurt anyone. They taught, they healed, they welcomed. And when they needed help, everyone looked away. If we do the same, what have we really changed? His words settled over the room. Younger delegates, who had grown up learning about Earth's past mistakes, shifted in their seats. An engineer from Nairobi spoke next. My team built the Resolute's life support system. We didn't build it just to fly in circles. We built it to help. A farmer from Argentina added, my village shared our last grain during the droughts. That's how we survived. Maybe the galaxy needs to learn that too. Slowly, the mood changed. It wasn't about winning a war. It was about doing what was right. When the vote came, it was close. But in the end, the Assembly agreed. Earth would send aid. Not as an army, but as a promise. A promise that no one should be left behind. News of the decision spread fast. On Mars, students painted murals of human and Kalari hands joined together. In orbital shipyards, workers stayed late to check every bolt on the Resolute. Captain Derek Moore received final orders. Go to Viridia, deliver supplies, protect civilians, and show the galaxy that humanity stood for something more than survival. His crew prepared without fanfare. Maria Lopez, the ship's chief engineer, ran diagnostics on the warp core for the third time. She was small with quick hands and a sharp mind. She'd grown up fixing water purifiers in a desert town, and she believed anything broken could be mended, if you cared enough. Now she cared about a whole planet she'd never seen. Ben Carter, the tactical officer, studied Zorath patrol routes. He wasn't eager to fight, but he knew defense was part of protection. He programmed the Resolute's shields to reroute power fast, so even a small ship could hold its ground. He also loaded non-lethal countermeasures, sonic pulses, light flares, things that could confuse without killing. Noah Patel, the medic, filled every storage locker with bandages, antiseptics, and nutrient packs. He'd worked in refugee camps after the last Earth conflicts, and he knew that healing began with showing up. He trained the crew in basic first aid just in case. Derek Moore watched them all. He didn't give long speeches. He just made sure